did go see Black Panther. And
we tried. I tried.
Like I said, John saw about 3/4 of it, I think.
Yeah.
This movie is long. It feels like maybe 2 or 3 different movies. I've heard a lot of people say it feels like 2 different movies. But really, when I thought about it, I thought it feels like a trilogy almost.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't mind it being long. Bottom line, this movie is good.
Mm-hmm.
And when I think about reviewing, I don't think in terms of scale of 1 to 10. It was entertaining, and how entertaining was it?
Yeah.
This movie is awesome. There's a lot of stuff going on.
It's something that you mentioned. We sat down and we ate lunch before we went into the film. And something that Nathan mentioned, and it's certainly the case in this film, is that there is an otherworldly feeling that you get when you enter Wakanda. It's almost Asgardian.
I was thinking when they first fly in and you see the city and you see some of their technologies and all that. My first thought was, how is vibranium able to do all this? I thought it was just a strong metal. But there's more things going on with vibranium than we knew, I think. But the other thing you get is it feels almost like Thor Ragnarok.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like a space adventure
when
they're in Wakanda, because it's so different from anything else on Earth.
I think that's why it feels like a trilogy, because you have you've got part Iron Man, you've got part Thor Ragnarok, and you've got part the original Thor, where you're introduced to this new place.
And we said that it feels like separate movies. The first part of this is, the whole movie is very heavy on character and character progression and even character backstory, fleshing everything out. So it does a really good job of filling out every character in the movie. For part of the movie, you have one villain, and then for another part of the movie, you have another villain. That's one thing that makes it feel like 2 completely different movies.
Right.
But the first part of the movie, when they go to South Korea, it feels like a spy flick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And everything going on feels like either Mission Impossible or a Bond film almost. The thing that makes it feel a lot like Bond is his sister, Black Panther's sister, is almost like Q.
Right. Well, she's remote controlling a car in London from... Was it in London?
No, the car was when they were in South Korea.
That's right.
She's sitting in her lab back in Wakanda,
right,
controlling the car. And she's able to do that because she gave them a receiver that they can just attach to the car, and then she can drive it from where she is.
Oh, yeah.
And be completely out of harm. Which the tech in this is literally out of this world. Some of the things the Wakandans are capable of and the technology they have, that's what makes it feel like that space adventure, because these are not earthly weapons that they have.
Right.
And it's all developed from vibranium.
Mm-hmm.
So everything that they have, from the weapons they use to the medical technology that they show off, she does some things with his suit and his tech that is kind of progresses his character.
Yeah, absolutely. That was the one thing that I was going to mention was specifically the new suit and some of the capabilities that it does have. The kinetic energy build up and release. That was very handy throughout the film.
And he uses it well too, and the way that it displays it too is awesome, because his suit is black, but when he takes a hit, it turns purple in that area. So the more hits he takes, the more purple shows up. So you get a visual representation of just how much energy he has stored, and that kind of pays off in the end. In one of the last scenes that you've actually missed. So, he does release that energy in a way that's awesome. But you can tell what he's about to do, because his suit's completely purple, because he's been taking a lot of hits, and you're just waiting on it, and finally it pays off. But one of the things about this movie, a lot of people are saying that it breaks the mold as far as Marvel villains, because Killmonger, it has really his motives or his reasons for doing what he's doing make perfect sense, and you tend to agree with him. He doesn't carry it out in the right way. he has good ideas, but then he kind of takes it too far, and he, of course, does evil things. But his motives are completely understandable, and he's way more complex than most villains. And that element is there, and he's much more fleshed out and complex than any other, especially like an initial. Because you have an Iron Man, he fights basically another Iron Man.
Well, this the one thing that I was going to mention was that while he may be a more fleshed out character, and his motivations are a little bit more understandable.
And I know what you're about to say.
Once again,
I was about to come back to that.
Once again, and it's just like every Marvel movie, especially the origin movies, or the first movie. I guess this wouldn't really be. It's kind of an origin movie, but once again, you have where the hero fights his mirror, and it's quite literal.
That's what I was getting around to saying, is that a lot of people who are reviewing this film are praising the villain for its depth and his motives, and that's there, and that is good. But when it comes right down to it, he's another Black Panther.
Mm-hmm.
He's just in another version of the suit.
Right.
And so the story there is done better, and he's fleshed out way better than most villains, and his motives are there. The first part of the movie, Claw is the villain, and it's a completely different movie.
I think that's kind of that's Claw distracts, because I feel I'm trying to think how to say it without spoiling
How
anything.
not to spoil?
Yes. Okay, I'll simply say that I felt like Claw could have been better utilized. I was disappointed.
I almost wish that he had been the main villain. Now, I understand why they went with Killmonger. Because, I mean, look, in the long run, he is a better villain and a better match for Black Panther.
Right.
But maybe this should have been two movies where Claw is in the first one and then Black Panther 2 is Killmonger.
Well, I mean, we've seen Claw a few times, and each time he's up to no good, and he's really kind of a C level, D level villain. But at the same time, the way that they've used him throughout the films that he's been around, it was almost like they were building him up to be something bigger.
Well, and he was used much more in this one.
Mm-hmm.
That's why when the movie starts out, it looks like he's going to be the main thing they have to deal with. And while Killmonger is a better villain, and like I said, he puts up a better fight. Mm-hmm. It still would have been nice to have seen more from Claw. Or maybe
Andy Serkis is amazing.
And that's one of the things that stands out with him, is most people only know him from the green screen work and the CGI and basically being the puppet.
Right.
And you get to see him actually act in this one. And you saw very little of it in Age of Ultron and others, but in this one he's got a bigger role, and you get to see him kind of play it up in person on screen. It's nice to see.
Oh yeah, and he did it too. He was. I thought he was fantastic as far as his character, the way that he portrayed the character. He did a fantastic job. Speaking of character, I thought that the relationship between Black Panther and his sister, you see the kind of sibling rivalry that exists, but also at the same time you see how they back each other up. And
this movie, like I said, it has so many different aspects to it that are not in other Marvel movies. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of story that actually takes place, and like I said, building up these characters and establishing the characters individually and their relationships with one another. And that goes from everything from the various tribes to the various members of his family. One thing that surprised me on screen, and I guess it's because I haven't really looked at many posters or seen very many previews. I tried to stay away from that. I did not even know Forrest Whitaker was in the movie.
I didn't either.
Until I saw him on screen. And so that was a nice surprise. He plays a good role too. Mm-hmm. But I really hate that you
Angela Bassett. I had no idea she was going to be in that.
Right, and that, like I said, part of that is me just not looking at much promotional material. I didn't want to be spoiled for anything, but I hate that you missed the last 40 minutes because it really got going. A lot of people are saying you have a lot of action in the front end, and then in the middle it slows down a little, and then the action picks up and finishes off.
Right.
I never felt bored, even in the slow part.
Right.
It really wasn't that boring at all. It was just a different type of movie.
Well, because during the slow part, it was still visually amazing, and they used that to kind of help build the story. The last 40 minutes, which I missed.
And there was one thing that a lot of people had talked about, and then the movie, I didn't even realize the movie would address it as much or make it a main plot point as much as it did. But people were talking about this amazing city and technology that they have right in the middle of Africa, and yet you have Africa all around that who could use some help, and not only Africa, but most of the world could use this technology in various ways, and they're keeping it all to themselves. But they kind of explain why they're keeping it all to themselves, is they kind of fear that it might fall into the wrong hands, and then you see what could happen as soon as it does fall into Killmonger's hands. But their reasoning for not sharing any of it is, well, we don't want bad things to happen. But there's bad things happening that they could fix. And I understand where they're coming from as well. We're actually trying to be as low key as we can be. We don't want to stand out and draw attention. And then they're probably looking at being attacked or invaded all the time. People trying to steal their technology.
Right.
And so I get that part of it.
The fact of the matter is that they make Tony Stark look like a chump.
Right. This is, like I said, we always see these movies where the aliens are 100 times more futuristic than we are, or technological, and they're so much more advanced, and we have no shot against them.
And
that's what Wakanda feels like.
Absolutely.
Is this, and it is alien tech. Space rocks fell to the ground there, and they've developed this entire society based on that.
Right.
But the way that it's hidden away, and the outskirts of Wakanda are literally just farmers in the wilderness. And that's the way the world sees it. But then when you fly past the shield and get into the city proper, it's a whole other world.
Well, at the beginning of the film, this isn't really spoiling anything. They have a news reporter, and they talk about Wakanda and how it's in the middle of this impenetrable rainforest.
Right.
Which, if it was impenetrable, they wouldn't have been able to come out of it anyway. But just kind of as an aside, what did you think about Michael B. Jordan? Of all of the cast, I felt like, and I enjoyed his character. I watched him in Creed, and I've seen him in some other things, and I thought he did really well with Creed. But I was a little, I don't know, he was a little harder to swallow than the rest of them. Because maybe it was because of that. He was extremely, his character is very abrasive.
He stands out in a couple of ways. One of the things, everybody in the movie does this Wakandan accent except for him, because he grew up in Oakland,
right,
in the story. So he has the normal American accent, which is his normal voice. Mm-hmm. Everybody else in the whole movie are speaking in other accents, especially all the Wakandas. They have very thick Wakandan,
except for the token white guys.
Accents. Yeah, and even the white guy in the movie is not American, and he's speaking in an accent besides his own. Mm-hmm. He's English. But Michael B. Jordan, I guess they kind of explain away the difference in him and the others. His character is just completely different. He grew up here. He's been in the military. He's been in wars. And he explains, you missed this part.
Yeah, well, maybe
it's in one of the trailers where he's actually challenging. Let's see, which one is it? It's T'Challa.
Right.
Okay. He's challenging T'Challa.
Not T'Chaka.
T'Chaka is his dad.
Right.
He's challenging T'Challa, and he says, I've killed people all over the world, basically. I've killed in Afghanistan and Iraq, and I've prepared my entire life. And he says all of this, killing all these people so I could kill you.
Right.
And so that's kind of his background. He's got a huge chip on his shoulder, and of course, you find out in the movie all the specifics of why, and that's why I say you understand completely where he's coming from.
Well, maybe that's where the trouble that I had with it was with a lot of the villains that you have a certain amount of sentimentality to them. You know, with Loki, he comes across he's even if he's doing a lot of bad things, he's still really charismatic. You could say what's another one? You could say the same thing for the Red Skull before you see his Red Skull.
Well, and
he's charismatic if nothing else.
I will admit that if you're looking for a charismatic character or a character that is enjoyable,
it's not this one.
You're not going to find that in Killmonger. Mm-hmm. Michael B. Jordan plays it from that angle completely, so that you're not saying, hey, this is a likable character. He does completely unlikable things the entire movie. But when he's explaining why he's doing these unlikable things, you're like, okay, I get what has caused you to feel this way.
Right.
Why he has this mentality or this, like I said, this chip on his shoulder. And he makes some sense from that point. Now, he's completely evil. He's not redeemable and is not redeemed. So, there's that. He is a villain through and through.
And don't expect to enjoy it. As, Loki, he is turned into one of the most enjoyable parts of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The character, the portrayal, and that's not going to be Michael B. Jordan here.
Yeah, he's, like I said, he's the villain through and through. The only thing you get is the complexity of why he's doing the things he's doing. He carries out a plan from the first time you see him to the end of the movie. He's got a plan that he's seeing through.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's very well calculated. It almost succeeds. I don't know if that's a big spoiler that the bad guy loses at the end of the movie.
No, but, it's not.
But he almost succeeds in carrying out his plan. And there's some interesting things that go on with the culture. And that's why I say that part of this movie is, it's more than just you see graphics here or there or images that are from African culture. Like the Wakandan culture is basically African culture. Or some people say, well, it's what it would be if they were futuristic. So they would still hold on to some of those spiritual aspects, tribal aspects, even having this kind of technology. And you see both sides of that in this movie. You see the futuristic Wakandans, and then when they're doing some of their things that are cultural, it's literally it looks prehistoric when they go to do some of the challenges and stuff.
Right.
So, they're not always shooting lasers or concussion grenades and things like that.
Right. Well, that's something that they address too. Is how important everybody understands that tradition is important, but how important is that tradition when you're talking about when it alienates that group of people from the rest of the world?
And they address that, and that's again part of the movie you miss. But towards the end of the movie,
that's something that they talk about the whole time.
They talk about it throughout the whole movie,
right.
And at the end of the movie, and then in one of the post-credit scenes, you get to see them. They kind of own it, and they say, "Look, we're gonna help everybody." And without giving anything away, that they kind of make that shift, and they make it publicly known we're gonna help. We're going to help around us. We're going to help around the world. And that's going to be a big plus going into Infinity War, in that they're going to need all the help they can get. And the truth is, if you had as many people as possible with this technology, it's going to help. Of course, we know that when Thanos gets all the stones and he's got the gauntlet fully loaded and ready to go, there's really not a lot you're going to be able to do about it.
And you know he will.
And he will. It's going to come to that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, we need all the help we can get, but truthfully, all the help we can get is still not a match for Thanos when he's fully loaded and got all the stones.
And you're just now getting the rights to Fox.
Right. when we're not getting the rights to some major characters in time for the Infinity War, it's going to hurt.
Right.
But, that's a whole other topic, talking about the Fox deal and all the things that I would like to see from that. We talked about that a little bit when we were talking about Marvel versus DC. But we need to figure out how our rating system for movies is going to go. Like I said, I don't really feel like I'm necessarily professional enough to say, well, this movie was 9 out of 10, or this movie was 8 out of 10, or whatever. I look at movies. Was it a good time? Was it not? Was it entertaining or not?
And then we also need to factor in rewatchability.
Yeah. This is, I feel like right now, this is one of the Marvel movies that I'll watch again.
Mm-hmm.
There are a few of them that I can rewatch, and then there are some that I don't have a desire to watch again. Part of that is their place in the story.
Mm-hmm.
So something like Civil War, I probably won't ever watch the whole movie. Now, I'll go back to the airport scene over and over.
Absolutely.
But I won't watch the movie from start to finish, usually. I'm not going to do that over and over and over.
Oh, come on now. The Cap Iron Man fight was classic.
Now, I will... now, the end of that movie is great. Mm-hmm. And I will probably watch it again as I go back through every Marvel movie leading into Infinity War. Because I've got to go all the way through and then see it.
Well, you have to, because that's one thing that leads up to where we are now.
Right. And truthfully, Civil War is almost a prequel to Black Panther, because this movie picks up right after Civil War is over. So that's actually a good pair, a good combo. If you want to check out Civil War again and then go to the theater and see Black Panther, that would be the perfect segue.
It would.
It leads right into this, and so you get then you get basically the Black Panther trilogy at the theater.
Right.
So I'm gonna say Black Panther was a great movie. It was entertaining. It's getting a lot of high scores. And it deserves those. There's a lot of things going on here that make it better than a lot of Marvel movies. It is a movie that I'll probably watch again. Now, when I watch it again, I may, and I've said before, when I watch movies, I'm not being a critic. I'm just entertained by everything I've seen on screen. And I've heard some people talk about the CGI, and some of the things don't look exactly right, and it looks cartoony in some places. When I'm watching a movie, I really don't care about that.
Well, that may be true, and that's kind of one of the things that, kind of goes back to the Justice League with the mustache. When I went through and I watched the movie the first time, I didn't even notice it. I'll be honest. It didn't jump out at me because I wasn't looking for it. But then every time that I've seen it since, I'm like, okay, yeah, this is a mustache shot. And that's where they had to go through and redo it. So I was looking to be entertained, and I was.
And that's one of the things. Yeah. When I watch Black Panther again, especially when it comes out on Blu-ray and everything's crystal clear, much crisper than the theater even, you'll probably notice some of those visual effects not being perfect. But I don't. A lot of people knock points off of movies because, well, the CGI wasn't as great as it should have been. I mean, I tend not to think about the technical aspects of it while I'm watching it. There are some things that really stand out. Andy Serkis's sleeve when he lost his arm.
Yeah.
And he still has just like the big sleeve there, and it's swinging back and forth.
I saw that too. I was like,
but I was kind of ready for that. I had heard somebody mention that in a review, like, watch out for this scene or whatever. So I was expecting that. But stuff like that really doesn't bother me. It doesn't take away from the entertainment value of a movie when I'm watching it, at least the first time.
I did have a big question. I'm trying to think how to put it without making it a spoiler. After Killmonger and Claw go separate ways,
What a good way to put it.
How does Killmonger get to Wakanda?
That's another part you missed.
Okay.
And that is a huge spoiler.
Okay. Okay.
I'll say this. Remember earlier I talked about that you have Wakanda inside the hidden part, but then outside it, on the outskirts, is what the world sees as Wakanda.
Right.
So he comes to the edge where everybody knows that, okay, these farmers are Wakandans.
Right.
He comes to that part.
I see. Okay.
And brings to them something that makes them bring him in.
Yeah. Okay.
And you could probably...
He makes the deal.
I got it. Probably know what he deals with.
I know what you're
without spoiling it.
I'm
but
there.
He brings something that they're like, oh, well, you come on in. So they bring him in. And of course he is literally in the bloodline and in line for King of Wakanda.
There's a reason why he could also be a Black Panther.
Right. He has the right to be a Black Panther, and you see all that in some of when the movie starts to flesh out that part of the story.
Yeah.
You see why that is. But that's why I say it's so well done. All of it is so well written, and even though the movie feels like completely different movies at different parts of it, it still works. When you see Black Panther in the Civil War, you would never have guessed, you would never have imagined that this is what Wakanda would have been like. Even knowing what it was, I mean, you know from the comics what it is, but if you had only seen Black Panther in Civil War and you didn't know any of the history of him in the comics, you would have had no clue. You would not have been expecting Wakanda to be what it is.
Yeah, I mean, as I'm watching the film, I'm thinking about Wakanda could be the reason for Area 51. I mean, it could be Roswell.
Yeah.
Because of just some of the things that you see visually, especially at the beginning of the film.
And I really need to do some research and find out who knows what about this, but I do have a question about vibranium and all of the things that it's able to do. Everything that they do in Wakanda, every bit of advanced technology they have is done with vibranium. And they figured out different ways to use it. Like I said, even in the medical field, is because vibranium has allowed them to heal in ways that we just haven't discovered yet.
I wonder how much of that, though, is because it's a discovery and because they're able to market it as such a rare thing that they're able to use. You sell a little bit of it, you make a lot of money because it's so rare.
Yeah.
And they're able to turn that around.
And like I said, I have to do some more research on how it is they're able to get all of these different abilities just from the fact that they have vibranium.
Right.
But that piqued my interest, seeing all the things they're able to do with it. And all we have is Cap's shield. Okay. We'll pare this down. We'll figure out exactly how we want to rate the movies. I love, one of the podcasts that I love is the Weekly Planet, and they either call it best movie ever, worst movie ever. It's either or.
Really, I like it. Okay,
and I like that, but that's theirs. So I'm gonna give it a score of entertaining and rewatchable.